The moment Laurel Whitmore placed her resignation letter on my desk, I realized the kiss she believed I had forgotten was about to cost us everything. Her fingers trembled against the white envelope, but her expression remained painfully calm, the polished expression of a woman who had spent years teaching herself how not to break in front of anyone. Sunlight poured through the glass walls of her corner office, illuminating the tears she refused to let fall, and in that terrible silence I understood that she was not leaving because of the company, the pressure, or the promotion she had recently lost. She was leaving because she thought the most vulnerable moment of her life had meant nothing to me. Before I tell you how one kiss nearly destroyed two people who had spent years pretending they needed no one, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances. Sometimes the most important words are the ones fear convinces us never to say, and sometimes remembering is not enough unless we are brave enough to admit what a memory means. My name is Callum Mercer, and for nearly 4 years I worked as a senior project coordinator at Ellison & Vale, a small but ambitious architectural design firm in Portland. Laurel was my boss, though that simple title never fully described her. She was the youngest department director in the firm's history, respected for her precision, feared for her silence, and admired for a strength that seemed almost impossible to disturb. She arrived before most employees, stayed focused through lunch, and remembered details everyone else overlooked. She knew which clients hated phone calls, which interns needed encouragement, and which employees were quietly struggling even when they insisted they were fine. Yet she rarely allowed anyone to know anything personal about her. Her office was spotless, her clothes were elegant without being showy, and her emotions remained locked behind careful smiles. Most people assumed she was cold. I knew she was not. I had seen her secretly pay for an employee's emergency dental treatment, rearrange a project schedule so a new father could spend time with his premature daughter, and sit beside an overwhelmed intern for nearly an hour after a disastrous presentation. Laurel cared deeply, but she had learned to hide kindness as though it were a weakness someone might use against her. Our relationship had always rested on a delicate boundary. We worked unusually well together because she trusted my judgment and I understood the pressure she carried. I could tell when she was worried by the way she aligned papers that were already straight. She could tell when I was discouraged because I became overly agreeable. We rarely discussed our private lives, yet we knew each other in the quiet ways that mattered. She knew I called my widowed father every afternoon during lunch. I knew she kept granola bars in her desk for employees who skipped meals. She knew I had turned down a better-paying position because I believed in the community housing project our team was designing. I knew she visited her mother every Sunday at a rehabilitation center after a serious stroke. There were moments when our eyes lingered too long across a conference table or our hands brushed while reaching for the same blueprint, but neither of us acknowledged them. She was my boss, I was her employee, and both of us had histories that made emotional risk feel more dangerous than loneliness. The kiss happened on a bright Thursday afternoon after the most difficult presentation of Laurel's career. Our firm had spent 18 months developing a low-income housing complex designed to preserve dignity while reducing construction costs. Laurel had invested more than professional ambition in the project because she had grown up in temporary housing after her father disappeared, though almost no one at the company knew that. During the final meeting, one of the senior partners, Frederick Vale, took credit for her design strategy and then blamed her when the client questioned the budget. I watched her absorb the humiliation without defending herself, because Frederick had already warned her that speaking out would make her appear unstable. The presentation ended shortly before 3 o'clock, and everyone returned to the office pretending nothing had happened. Laurel stepped into an empty materials room where sunlight fell through the narrow windows onto shelves of tile samples and rolled plans. I followed because I knew she was not all right. She stood with her back to me, shoulders rigid, and said she needed a moment. When I told her she deserved better than what had happened, something inside her finally gave way. She did not collapse or sob. Laurel simply turned toward me with a look of exhaustion so raw that I almost failed to recognize her. She admitted in a broken whisper that she was tired of being strong enough for everyone while never being allowed to need anyone herself. I told her she did not have to pretend with me. For several seconds we stood close enough to hear each other breathe. Then she lifted her face, perhaps intending to say something, and I touched her cheek before I could stop myself. She could have stepped away. Instead, her hand closed around the sleeve of my jacket, and she kissed me. It was not reckless or dramatic. It was soft, trembling, and painfully honest, as though years of unspoken loneliness had found one brief place to rest. When we separated, sunlight remained warm across her face, and for one extraordinary moment she looked peaceful. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor, and fear returned to her eyes. She left the room without another word, carrying the weight of what had happened while I remained frozen beside the shelves, overwhelmed by the certainty that the kiss had changed everything. That same afternoon, before either of us could speak privately, I was injured on the construction site of another project. A loose metal frame struck the scaffolding near me, causing me to fall several feet onto a platform below. I did not lose consciousness, but I suffered a concussion, a fractured wrist, and several bruised ribs. Laurel accompanied me to the hospital because she was the department director and because, as I later understood, she was terrified. The doctor warned that the concussion might cause confusion and gaps in memory surrounding the accident. While I waited beneath bright hospital lights, I remembered the kiss perfectly, but my thoughts moved slowly and speech made my headache worse. Laurel stood beside the bed, pale and shaken, asking whether I remembered the presentation, the materials room, or what had happened before the fall. I remembered everything, including the touch of her hand on my sleeve and the sadness in her eyes afterward. Yet I saw how frightened she was, not only for me but for her career, my position, and the consequences of crossing a professional boundary. Believing silence would protect her until I could think clearly, I told her the last thing I remembered was leaving the conference room. The change in her expression was almost invisible, but it haunted me for months. Relief appeared first, followed by something far more painful. She nodded, arranged the blanket near my injured arm, and transformed herself back into my boss. I expected we would talk after I recovered. Instead, my lie created a distance I had never intended. Laurel became formal and careful around me. She stopped bringing coffee to my desk when she bought one for herself. She no longer asked my opinion after meetings unless others were present. She reassigned our weekly planning sessions to another manager and avoided being alone with me. I told myself she needed time, and because I was embarrassed by my own cowardice, I gave her too much of it. Every day I remembered the kiss, yet every day admitting the truth became harder. I feared she would believe I had manipulated her by pretending not to remember. I feared she regretted it. Most of all, I feared that asking whether the kiss meant anything would force her to reject me, and I had already lost enough people in my life to understand how easily fear can disguise itself as patience. Laurel's distance was not the only problem. Frederick continued undermining her, gradually removing her authority and presenting her ideas as his own. When a director position opened on the executive committee, Laurel was the obvious candidate, but Frederick privately questioned her judgment and described her as emotionally inconsistent. I knew the accusation was false, yet I also knew our kiss could be twisted into evidence against her if anyone discovered it. That possibility deepened my silence. Laurel believed I had forgotten. I believed pretending to forget protected her. Neither of us understood that silence was giving Frederick exactly what he wanted. He isolated her, weakened her confidence, and convinced her that every mistake proved she did not belong. The woman who once entered meetings with quiet certainty began rereading every email 3 times. She stopped offering bold ideas and apologized for decisions that required no apology. Watching her shrink beneath someone else's cruelty was unbearable, but when I tried to support her, she thanked me with distant professionalism, never allowing the conversation to become personal. The unexpected turning point came when an intern named Tessa Caldwell found archived drafts showing that Laurel had created the entire community housing proposal months before Frederick claimed it as his own. Tessa brought the files to me because she was afraid to approach senior leadership. The evidence included timestamps, handwritten notes, and emails proving that Frederick had deliberately removed Laurel's name from key documents. I urged Laurel to report him, but she refused. She said the firm would protect a partner over a director and that fighting would only destroy what remained of her reputation. Her resignation letter appeared on my desk 2 days later because Frederick was away at a client meeting and Laurel wanted me to prepare the team for her departure. She intended to leave quietly by the end of the week. As she stood in my office beneath the clear morning light, she explained that she had accepted a smaller position in another city. Her voice remained controlled until she said she hoped I would remember our years of working together kindly, even if some moments had disappeared from my memory. The word struck me harder than the fall from the scaffolding. I looked at the resignation letter, then at the woman I had allowed to believe she had been alone in the most vulnerable moment of her life. I understood that my silence had not protected her. It had wounded her. Laurel had spent months thinking she had kissed a man who could not remember, then watched that man behave as though nothing meaningful had happened. Perhaps she believed the accident had erased the only moment in which she had allowed herself to be fully seen. Perhaps she believed forgetting had spared me embarrassment. Whatever story she had told herself, I could no longer let fear write the ending. I stood, closed the office door, and told her I remembered the materials room. Her entire body went still. I told her I remembered the sunlight across the tile samples, the tremble in her hand, the way she had held my sleeve, and every second of the kiss. I admitted that I had lied at the hospital because I saw fear in her face and believed pretending to forget would protect her career until we could speak safely. Pain replaced the shock in her eyes. She asked how I could have watched her carry that memory alone. There was no defense that would not deepen the harm, so I gave her the truth. I told her I had been afraid, not of the company or Frederick, but of discovering that the moment meant more to me than it did to her. I admitted that each day of silence made the next confession harder, until my cowardice became a wall between us. Laurel finally allowed her tears to fall. She said she had not been relieved when I claimed to forget. She had been devastated. The kiss had been the first time in years she had trusted someone with the part of herself that felt tired, frightened, and imperfect. Believing it had vanished from my memory made her feel as though that honest version of herself had never existed. Hearing the consequences of my choice stripped away every excuse. I apologized without asking her to forgive me. I told her she had every right to leave, but she should not leave because Frederick had taught her to doubt her worth or because I had been too frightened to tell the truth. Then I showed her Tessa's evidence. For the first time in months, Laurel looked at the files not with uncertainty but with rising anger. I reminded her that the housing project existed because of her vision and that dozens of families would one day live with greater dignity because she refused to design merely for profit. I told her that leaving might offer peace, but surrendering her name to a man who had stolen her work would follow her into every future office. Laurel spent the next hour reviewing the documents. By early afternoon, she withdrew her resignation and requested an emergency meeting with the managing board. Tessa agreed to provide a statement, and I submitted my own records showing how often Frederick had excluded Laurel from discussions regarding her designs. Laurel entered the meeting carrying a folder and years of suppressed courage. She did not exaggerate, plead, or apologize. She presented the facts with the same clarity that had once made her an extraordinary leader. The investigation lasted several weeks, all of them unfolding through tense daytime meetings, interviews, and document reviews. Frederick attempted to blame administrative confusion, but the evidence proved deliberate misconduct. He was removed from active leadership and later resigned from the firm. The board restored Laurel's authority, credited her publicly for the housing project, and offered her the executive committee position she had been denied. Yet her greatest change was not professional. She stopped treating vulnerability as a flaw. She began asking for help before exhaustion turned into despair. She encouraged employees to document their contributions and speak openly when they felt dismissed. She also established a confidential mentoring program for junior women in design, ensuring that no one beneath her leadership would feel as isolated as she once had. As for us, forgiveness did not arrive as quickly as romance stories often pretend it does. Laurel needed time to trust me again, and I needed to prove that honesty would no longer depend on convenience. To remove the imbalance between us, I transferred to another division within the company under a different director. We began meeting for lunch in public cafes, not as boss and employee, but as two imperfect people learning how to speak without hiding. I listened when she described the humiliation of believing I had forgotten. She listened when I explained how my father's emotional withdrawal after my mother's death had taught me to expect love to disappear whenever I reached for it. We did not excuse each other's wounds, but we learned to understand them. Trust returned through ordinary acts, answered messages, kept promises, difficult conversations, and the courage to say what we felt before fear could distort it. Nearly a year after the kiss, the community housing complex held its opening ceremony beneath a clear spring sky. Families walked through bright courtyards Laurel had designed to feel open, safe, and welcoming. Children drew pictures with chalk near the garden beds while local officials praised the project. Laurel stood beside me in the afternoon sunlight, no longer the woman who believed she had to hide every tender part of herself. She told me the materials room kiss had once felt like the greatest mistake of her life. Then she smiled and said the real mistake had been allowing fear to speak for both of us afterward. I told her I remembered everything, but now I understood that memory mattered less than what we chose to do with it. I asked whether I could kiss her again, this time without secrets, confusion, or shame. She said yes, and when our lips met beneath the bright open sky, the moment did not feel like a stolen escape. It felt like a promise honestly made. Before this story ends, leave a meaningful comment about a time when fear kept you from telling someone the truth, or share what forgiveness means to you when trust has been broken. Your words may remind another person that healing does not require perfection, it requires honesty, accountability, and the courage to change. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Laurel and I eventually built a life based not on the illusion that love prevents mistakes, but on the understanding that real love refuses to hide from them. We still disagreed, still carried old fears, and still occasionally needed time to find the right words. But we no longer mistook silence for safety. Whenever one of us felt tempted to retreat, we remembered the months we had lost because I believed protecting a memory meant pretending it did not exist. The kiss itself had not changed our lives. The truth did. It taught Laurel that vulnerability could coexist with strength, and it taught me that love cannot survive on feelings we are too frightened to name. Sometimes second chances arrive quietly, in a sunlit office, beside a resignation letter, when two people finally stop pretending they have forgotten what their hearts have remembered all along.